Greetings. Welcome to our Lessons in Leadership series. I am honored to welcome Janet Bullard to this show. Janet has had an illustrious business career, including stints at Bank of New England and Citizens Bank, and she is right now president at Whitehead and Company. Janet has an undergraduate degree from Western New England University in business and an MBA from Northeastern University. Beyond her degrees, she is also licensed as a chartered financial analyst. Janet is also very deeply involved with the community, and she serves as a trustee of Western New England University and also serves on the board of the Teens Executive Council at D'Amore-McKim University. So we are extraordinarily delighted to have Janet here. Janet, welcome.
Thank you, Raj. It's a pleasure to be with you, as always.
Thank you. I read that you were raised in Montreal, and early on, you told me in a conversation prior that you knew you wanted to be a businesswoman. So could you trace your formative influences in Canada and what prompted you to think that business was the career for you?
Well, I was born in Montreal, and I was born in an extremely poor environment. And my father died when I was 2 years old at the very beginning of World War II in 1939. My father died during the second year of the war. And my mother went to work in an ammunition plant, and she was poisoned by one of the ingredients that went into the bombs in bomb making. So she couldn't take care of me because she was really quite incapacitated, at least for a while. She did recover eventually. But so that her 2-year-old could be taken care of, she asked her first cousin and her husband if they would shelter me. And after a while, they decided that it would be best if they adopted me. But my adoptive mother, being my natural mother's cousin, they always stayed very close. And so I was always close to both of them. I was always educated in French. My adoptive parents were both French. My natural mother was French. My father actually was British. But I always grew up in speaking French and went to French schools my entire early education, as well as high school and nursing school. Yes, I did choose to become a nurse. I wanted to be a doctor, but my family didn't have the kind of money necessary for that. So I went to nursing school, but didn't find that was satisfying. And consequently, it showed I studied very well, but the nuns didn't seem to think that I was fit for nursing school. So in my third year, actually, which was the last year, I left nursing school because I really wasn't fit to be a nurse. I wanted to run the hospital, and it was just, that didn't work with the doctors. So I went to a business school to learn shorthand and typing, and I went to work as a secretary. I had to be bilingual. In Canada, in French Canada, you couldn't get a job if you didn't speak English, especially as a secretary, because you had to take dictation in both French and English. So I was exposed to a lot of English. And when I married my all-American boy from Chicopee, Massachusetts, I could speak English with a very heavy French-Canadian accent. But I managed fine. And I did go to work as a secretary for the head of it was called the computer department at the time. And he was an alumni of Western New England. And I was his secretary, and he was trying to convince me that I should go to evening school and get a college degree. And it happened that my new husband was at Western New England, and that position was eliminated. And I went to work. I was still not going to college. I was still a secretary. I went to work for the head of an investment department in Springfield, Mass. And I was fascinated with this type of work. As I was taking messages for him and dictation and so on. So one day I said to him, I really would like to do what you do someday. And he said, the board of directors would never have a woman managing money. You have to remember this was the early 60s. So I went back to my Selectric typewriter and said to myself, I'm going to show you. I enrolled immediately at Western New England for a business administration degree. And this was 1963. I graduated 6 years later, being night school. It took a long time. We went summers as well. So it would have been 7 years otherwise. But in 6 years, I graduated, which we're now at 1969. That year, that boss left, and I was promoted to assistant trust investment officer and took over. So here I was with a bachelor's degree and and working in investments, being a portfolio manager. And I was recruited by Bank of New England to work in their trust investment department. So I moved to Boston and decided that I wanted to become a chartered financial analyst. But before that, I thought it would be best to get my master's. So I enrolled at Northeastern, again, night school. And as soon as I got my MBA, I pursued the Chartered Financial Analyst program, which is, of course, as many of you know, is a 3-year program. And each exam has to be passed before we can go on to the second and third level. I did it in 3 years and worked my way up at the Bank of New England, was recruited at Citizens Bank, which meant moving from Boston, where by this time I was divorced and I had a new boyfriend who lived in Boston. So I didn't want to go to Providence. Providence is now a very attractive city, a very nice city, but at the time it didn't look very good. And I couldn't quite imagine living in a much smaller city, having been born in Montreal, a very large city, and living in Boston, also quite large, as you know. Moving to Providence was a huge move. But my boyfriend at the time, after much debate whether I would move, said to me, you know, here you're a small fish in a big pond. And at Citizens Bank, you'll be a much bigger fish in a much smaller pond. And that did it. I was convinced. So I left Boston. I went to work in Providence. I bought a house in Providence, but I kept my residence in Boston so I could go on weekends and keep up with my boyfriend, who is now my husband. I worked at the Bank of New England for 10 years, and I worked at Citizens Bank for 10 years as a vice president at Citizens Bank. And I was recruited at another bank in Boston I will not name because the position could have been very, very interesting, but I wasn't managing money anymore. I was responsible for bringing in money, which I had done very well in my previous 2 banks. So I wasn't managing money, and I couldn't imagine giving up that part of my life, which I absolutely adored. So I decided that when I left the bank, the Citizens Bank, a lot of my clients wanted me to continue managing their portfolios. And I realized that I had enough of these former clients who wanted to come with me that I could start my own business. I forgot to say that when I was a little girl, I always played I had a store, my imaginary store, and I was running the store. And I always wanted to be a businesswoman. And here I was working for the banks. They were getting the fees and I was doing all the work. So I said to myself, I'm going to start my own business. I had written a paper. I don't know if it was at Western New England or at Northeastern. And I said that I would never have my own business. But here I was. The first day I was on my own. I decided, how do I do this? I decided to put one foot on the floor and the second foot on the floor and go on with it and try it. I needed a copying machine. So I went to the store and I bought the copying machine. I brought it home. I put it together and it worked. And I said, this is it. Now I can do anything. Because imagine putting a copying machine together, having never done any such thing. But it gave me some confidence, which sounds a little bit ridiculous perhaps, but nevertheless, it was the third step by now. And here I am. That was in 1994. And I'm still managing money and absolutely loving it. And of course, fortunately, I'm mostly an equity investor. And that the equity market since 1994 has been absolutely wonderful with some ups and many downs. But I have lived through the downs. My clients have lived through the downs with me, and they don't worry anymore about the outcome because they know, having been with me for so many years, that things will work out.
No, this is fantastic. So I'm curious, you said you were fluent in shorthand in both French and English. Is the shorthand language the same across the two, across French and English, or is it French shorthand and English shorthand?
No, if you, depending on the type of shorthand you learn, if you hear it in French or in English, it's the same signs.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow, but it's very interesting to hear your story, Janet, especially your formative story of of where you have come from. But going back, you had a store when you were a young girl, at least a toy store, and so what prompted business as a career for you, at that point in time? Because you said early on you knew that. And because one of the things we struggle with, Janet, is there are some disciplines within business that have phenomenal gender parity, but there are some businesses, especially finance for us, the numbers are at about 38 or 40% or so. And I always am, given that business is and will always be a source of value creation, it is a phenomenal opportunity for young girls and women and so on. So I wanted to ask you this question about what made you think this is your career, and what advice would you have for young women who are thinking about business as a career?
Well, the impetus really was the encouragement of my superiors, and the discouragement in the case of the one who didn't think I could make it, being a woman. I forgot to say that I wanted to be rich. I always wanted to be rich because when I was a little girl, of course, I grew up in poor environment, and there was a man who had a Cadillac who lived close by our house. And I decided when I was about 6 years old that someday I was going to have a Cadillac, which would imply that I have to have money to make money. So I always had this urge to excel at what I was doing so that someday I could have the money to afford a Cadillac. And of course, the investment business had no women in the investment business. I was usually the only woman portfolio in the whole environment. And I thought that was very exciting to be a woman doing a man at the time what was a man's work. So it was the ambition not only to be rich, but to do better than the males in the profession. And when I went to Western New England, I was the only girl in the class, in all my classes. And that gave me such an impetus to absolutely excel in class, because I didn't want that, first of all, with my French Canadian accent. And I didn't want them to imagine that because I was a woman, I couldn't be just as good as they could be. So it was that the environment that gave me this excitement about making it somehow in a field that really wasn't like nursing, where it was only women at the time. You have to remember that the population, as the population ages, that the majority, well, there are more women survivors than men. So you have a very, very open market for women to come into the field and manage women's money, because a lot of women prefer to deal with a woman, just as a woman might prefer a woman doctor. And women have proven themselves. There have been some very successful women. Look at Janet Yellen at the head of the Fed, for instance, is a perfect example. So I think women should embrace the profession and not be scared because it's mostly, or the majority of money managers are men. But that's the challenge, and it's a pleasure. So I would encourage, I was going to say that the majority of mutual fund managers, portfolio managers in mutual funds, for instance, are men. There are very few women in the field. But the women some women in the field have been extremely successful. And there's no reason, I mean, most women manage their own checkbook and their own savings, and they even maybe their 401k or their IRAs anyway, or if they're saving on a part of their salary. Some of them might be investing it in some form or fashion. It may not be very aggressive. But again, it would help even to manage your own money and to work in the field. I just would like to encourage women to embrace the profession and at least explore it.
Yeah. So I also read in your bio that you are a co-author on at least 2 books, correct?
Yes.
You've written Principles of Investment and another book on personal finance and planning, correct?
Yes,
So
that's correct.
what prompted you to become an author?
Because I was asked. The American Management Association at the time came to me and asked me if I would write I did a lot of teaching, and someone heard me teach investment courses, of course. That's all I can teach. And asked me if I would be willing to write a book for them. And it was distributed by the American Management Association. And that was another challenge, which I was very happy to tackle.
No, that's fantastic. So I wanted to go back to your, obviously you have a BBA, you have an MBA, you're a chartered financial analyst. And I also read in your bio that you've done a course at Stanford Graduate School. So one common thread right through has been this emphasis on lifelong learning. So could you talk a little bit about that? Where did that learning curiosity come from? Because one of the things that strikes me over your career is this emphasis to learn constantly and consistently.
Well, because of the environment being what it was, I had to be better than everybody else, or try to be better than everybody else. And when I was working for the man who said I couldn't do his work, I started reading the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times it was the Herald Tribune at the time that I was reading. I would read it every morning on my way on the bus ride to work. so that when I got to the office, I could talk to him about things that I read about relative to business and ask questions and so on. And I realized that if I were to excel in this field, I had to show at least as much knowledge as the men in the profession, and hopefully even more knowledge. And it was the environment that I grew up in and matured in, and it worked. And also, if you work in investments, you meet people from all walks of life. And we, especially at Bank of New England and Citizens Bank, we were responsible for bringing in new business. And when you go talk to a musician, you have to be able to at least ask intelligent questions of the musician, or the pharmacist, or the doctor, of course. So I had to have a broad knowledge so I could talk about at least a little bit about a lot of subjects, or ask questions about a lot of things. To this day, I have the same routine. It's the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, because I have to be informed. If I talk to a client on the phone, I have to be completely up to date. And I also have some ideas of how to approach them and how to keep them happy, and etc. And the more you know in any business, the more successful you are.
Yes. So I'm going to go back to 1994, Janet, when you started your own business. You've had a tremendous career by then, uh, uh, with a couple of major organizations, etc. So what did you think when you started this business? What did you think were the capabilities that you had that gave you the confidence to strike out on your own? Because you were doing extraordinarily well as far as business was concerned. So what were those traits and capabilities that you thought you had that would make you successful owning your own business?
Well, I knew I was a very good salesperson, and I knew I could attract the business. And I mean, I knew it because I had done it and I had the results. And also, as I said, I had enough clients that were willing to come with me that actually I knew that the business would be profitable right from the beginning. And then I could add to it as time went on.
And if I remember you correct, you still have most of those clients that came with you in 1994. That
I
speaks
do.
to the relationship centricity that you've had, the fact that you built that trust over time. And if I remember you right, you said once that you were a doctor of their finances. That's a good attitude to have.
That's right. That's right. Um, and also, I have to say, there's been a lot of luck in all this, because the market, as I said before, has been excellent. And of course, our fees are based on the market values. And the market values have gone up very steadily, with a few glitches in, of course, 87 when I was at the bank. When I was at the bank in 87 and the market dropped by actually one index by 25%, but the general market was down about 20% in one day.
Wow.
That was an experience. And being able to keep the clients in that environment was very difficult. And then we had the period, we had long periods where the market didn't do anything. And that's in earlier days, between the 60s and the 70s, the stock market did nothing. And it was very difficult to retain clients. So you had to instill this confidence in them that things will be fine and things will work out. But on the element of luck is that the market has been good, and our fees being calculated on market values, the value of the company has grown steadily over the years,
Yes.
and still does.
Yeah. You talked, Janet, about the 1987 crash. So I wanted to ask you about these historic financial events, and you have tackled them, and you have tackled them with resilience. Your 1987 experience 2000 during the dot-com crash, and then 2008 during the global recession, and now we are going through the pandemic, if you will, the COVID-19. And so, what advice would you have based on your experiences to anybody watching on how do we navigate these, not only in terms of the stock market, how do you navigate these uncertainties?
Well, you have to have a lot of confidence in yourself, but that confidence, of course, is based on what does it take to do the profession that you have embraced or hope to embrace. And you have to develop those strengths, whether it's a sense of, well, first of all, confidence because of knowledge and keeping, of course, keeping up with the times and the business and the developments and so on, and embracing them, studying them as they happen. In the investment business, we have new products all the time. So we have to be familiar with the products. If you're in pharmacy, it's the same criteria. You just have to know what you're doing. And if that's the only thing you do in life is devote yourself to your profession, things will work out on the other aspects of your life, such as relationships and friendships and whatever it is that you need to have a happy life. And you'll get a lot of happiness out of success.
Got it. So again, I'm always fascinated. You said in 1987, you had this 25% drop in one index in one day. I mean, I can't even imagine what was, what people must have gone through. But you, on the other side, on the institutional side, so how did you feel the first time around? Did you have this optimism that this is all going to work out? How did you navigate that massive uncertainty you had not seen before, but communicate that confidence to the investors who had trusted in you? How did you go through that? I'm always fascinated at that, the autopsy of that day.
Well, if you study the history of the markets, I mean, 1929, I wasn't there, but in 1920, I read a lot about it. And the market always recovers because the market is based on the economy. And the economy has a propensity to grow. Even at times, it's very inflationary, but then you change your asset allocations accordingly. So over time, I mean, if you look at the history of the Dow, to use only one index, it has been a steady rise over the years because the economy is growing. And the market is a direct reflection of what's happening in the economy. And as we see now, of course, we had March of 2020 was an absolute catastrophe. It was pretty much the same as 87. Of all my clients, I had the daughter of one of my clients call and tell me at the very bottom of the market that she had sold 80% of her portfolio and that I should do the same for her father. And I said, that's not the way you invest, because I know I've been through so many of these gyrations. So I tried to calm her down. She called me about 3 times as the market was still very shaky in March and April, trying to convince me that I should raise cash in her father's account. And I said, the way the portfolio is invested, there's a large proportion of the assets that are not in stocks, they're actually in bonds. And at least I can liquidate bonds if he needs the cash without raising cash in advance. So just knowing that things would work out, and my goodness, I'm so happy I didn't sell anything. In fact, this was a buying opportunity of the decade, probably. But you have to have the resilience and you have to have the conviction based on your past knowledge that the market, that's what people sell at the wrong time, and then they're in cash and by the time they get back into the market has risen again.
Correct.
So it's just experience and learning the history of these various markets.
Yes. In fact, one of the things, and I'm not an investment professional and I don't play one on TV also, but I always tell people, please don't time the market. People don't do it,
No.
And so you were talking about innovative new products that are constantly out there in the investment profession. So now we have all these cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all that stuff. So as you think about, and there's been a lot of volatility, in the last month or so. What are your views on these new kinds of innovative products vis-a-vis the traditional time-tested products that you've always invested in?
Well, I haven't bought any Bitcoin and I'm not going to. I don't care how much money some people make in them. I know, again, the history because RCA, as a matter of fact, was one stock that historically performed a lot like this. And like these these companies that have become a trend all of a sudden. Like AMC, for instance, I don't understand it. That's an older company. GameStop is losing money.
Correct.
It doesn't make any money. I know that investing the way I've been advocating works over the years, and without taking the risk that you're taking in these new products. This is very, very risky business when a stock goes from 400 to 20 and then doubles overnight again, and now is what, at 95? I don't know. It's very, very risky. You do it once. I have a fellow that I see on a regular basis. He's in his 20s. He's studying to be an accountant, and he's dealing in these stocks. And someday he's going to get hurt very badly because speculation doesn't work over the long term. You make a lot of money one day, so you try something else the following day, and you lose. Eventually, you will lose money.
Got it. Be consistent and trust.
Stay with it. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, Janet, you started off the conversation by stating that when you were young, when you were a child, you knew you wanted to be rich because of the adverse circumstances that you grew up in. And you've been, I think, wildly successful in that count. But one of the interesting things about you is that you are an outstanding philanthropist. You and a community leader. You've been engaged with, I read that you were with the Providence Rotary Board, and you've been involved in the Lone Cardiovascular Research Foundation. You are involved as a board of trustee with Western New England University. You've been phenomenal for us. You've been with the DEC at D'Amore-McKim. So could you talk a little bit about your philanthropic outlook? What prompted you to get into this philanthropy and engagement? And what is your philosophy on that?
Well, I've been given a lot. And so I think I'm delighted to be able to give in return. And my family, my current family, is well taken care of by their father, very well taken care of by their father. So I don't, whatever I have now, I'm very happy to share it in great percentages with educational organizations, because I think the Western New England universities and the Northeastern universities are so important in building their students' characters and imparting the knowledge that will make them in turn successful and will be in a position to be philanthropic in turn when after their careers or even during their careers. And you get a lot of satisfaction in setting up a scholarship or endowing a chair or whatever. And I don't need the accolades of having my name on it, but if my name is on it, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, your name should be on it, Janet, because of two things. One, you are an inspirational figure, and more importantly, it helps in terms of setting aspirations for other people. So that's why I always tell donors, please, I know you're humble. I know you don't want publicity for your efforts, etc. But for that money to be amplified, for the efforts to be amplified, it always helps for us to have some sort of naming initiatives, etc. So that would be my humble suggestion to you as you think about the future. So let me ask you this, Janet. You talked about student knowledge, and so I want to ask you. So if there is a student who is coming to you and asking for advice and saying, I'm going to embark on this professional career, be it an undergraduate student or a graduate student or even a lifelong learning student, what would be your advice, Janet, to a student so that they are successful in their professional career?
Well, to be suited for the career, for one thing, you have to be well suited for it. You have to have the personality and the deep, deep desire to learn and to learn more and more about your profession every day for the rest of your life. It's dedication. It's if it takes 20 hours a day to do what you need to do to get there, by all means do it. Put everything else aside and be completely devoted to your career. If that's a goal of yours to be very successful, but always have ancillary relationships too. Relationships with all the people you meet all the time. Always have empathy and form relationships with the people who are going to be helpful to you, not because they're going to be helpful, but because it just will make you a better person. So relationships are very important, especially among your coworkers, of course, and your students, the students in your classes, and the professors, of course, are terribly important. And personal relationships outside of your field will develop by themselves as you become more and more successful and more knowledgeable in your field.
No, this is terrific, Janet. This has been an engrossing conversation. Obviously, you've been a pioneer in your field, and after talking to you, it is very evident why you're so successful. You know, you've coupled your passion with the talent, and made sure that your passion and talent were suited for the investment profession, etc. And of course, more importantly, one strand across your life has been your focus on relationships and the trust that you've built with people and so on. So it's been a very inspirational conversation, and I'm sure our community will enjoy hearing from you. Thank you so much for not only giving the time today, but also for serving on our board and for being such a wonderful ambassador for Northeastern University, Janet. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Raj. It's been a pleasure.